This is Mark Bell from SuperTraining Gym, SuperTraining Gym, the strongest gym in the West. And today we're bringing you my TMI, Too Much Information series. This is a Too Much Information series on floor press. Enough information to make you sick to your stomach where you just don't want to hear it anymore about how to floor press. All right, Mark Bell, we get it. We're done listening to you. We don't want to hear you talk about the floor press for a freaking hour. But you guys did tell me to stay in my lane. You hate when I talk about politics. You hate when I talk about COVID-19. You hate when I talk about this. You hate when I talk about that. So here I am, staying back in my lane. I'm back down to ground zero here, being able to speak to you about the stuff that we all love. This is Mark Bell from SuperTraining Gym, SuperTraining Gym, the strongest gym in the West. And today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite exercises to help improve the bench press. I get asked all the time, what are some exercises? What are some things I can do to help improve my bench? And a lot of times, from a general perspective, a lot of times it has to do with the style of programming that you're following. Maybe that's why you hit a plateau. Sometimes it has to do with like a weak muscle group. Maybe the triceps are failing. Maybe you need more shoulder work. I mean, there's so many different things to consider. Now, I've never been a fan of like specifically trying to even bother to understand what exactly it was that was holding me back. And the reason is that I always felt like the answer was more of a general thing rather than just a tiny little change somewhere. And the reason why I thought that was I started hearing a lot of people in the industry talk about, well, I don't know if that's because your infraspinatus isn't firing properly. I don't have any way of understanding how I would be able to come to such a conclusion. So for me, it was always about, I'm struggling in the bench press. Where am I struggling in the bench press? And how do I find a way to attack that specific problem? Rather than worrying about, hey, is it the internal rotation, external rotation? I would work towards correcting errors simply by just trying to implement some new things. And one of my favorite things that I implemented was a floor press. My bench press really moved like crazy when I started to bring in a floor press. At Westside Barbell, I did my first 500-pound raw bench press, and it was with a floor press. Later on, I went on to do a 578-pound bench press in competition, along with an 854-pound bench, and I attribute a lot of the success to the floor press. Who has the ability to do a floor press? Well, if you got a floor, then you're in luck. That's all you need. You need a barbell, you might need a rack, and you need some plates, and you need a floor. The floor press was invented by Dr. Floor in 1964. That's just a stupid joke that Jesse Burdick and I say. But I think it was Dr. Floor's last wishes that you implement his amazing invention of the floor press. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do it. I'm going to demonstrate when to do it. And I want to try to open up some dialogue to you guys and make you understand the importance of the movement. So here's one of the things I think the floor press can really help with. It can really help a lot with overcoming a static position. And so understanding it helping you to overcome a static position means that you have to do the exercise the right way. A lot of times when people do this movement, they don't throw that pause in there. I think, personally, I feel that this movement is a box squat for your upper body. You know, we know when we box squat that the box squat is going to be quite a bit different than a regular squat. And we know that we're trying to relax the hips and then we're trying to explosively come back up off the box. So if we're to apply that here, I'm gonna push my hips back. Okay, I'm gonna sit, and when I sit, I'm ready to pop back up, right? So I sit, I relax just a little bit, and I explode back up. Well, on this movement, we're gonna rest the tricep on the floor just briefly, get a little bit of a pause in there, and then we're gonna explode up. But a lot of times, one of the things I see people do wrong with a floor press, and then they don't get the benefit from it, and then they blame me. They blame Mark Bell, they blame SuperTraining Gym, they blame the floor press, they blame poor Dr. Floor, they blame Louis Simmons and say, this thing doesn't work. That exercise don't work, bro. It's a great exercise. It can be really effective. It worked great for me, and I think if you incorporate it properly, it can be super effective for you. So, without further ado, here's how we execute the floor press. Oh, yep. Oh, getting down the ground's the worst part. Oh, my back. Getting down the floor might be the hardest part of the exercise for you for the day, depending on where you're at. So, you know, what grip do we want to have with a floor press? For me, it was normally a thumb grip away from the smooth part. And that is simply, you put your thumb up here like this, you find the smooth part of the bar, and now my fist is a thumb length away from that smooth part. One of the reasons why I like that, why I like being in that range right there, is because my normal comp grip is out to where these power rings are, and it was usually with my ring finger or my middle finger on those rings. That's a much wider grip than just being a thumb grip away from the smooth. So the thumb grip away from the smooth allows for much greater range of motion. And you can kind of see, I kind of have a long bench pressing stroke, right? And I always wanted to actually lean into that. I didn't want to, in training, I didn't want to hide from that. I wanted to go towards that, so that way I can just make my arms really, really strong. And I think one of the biggest problems with a lot of people's bench press is the fact that their arms are simply not strong enough. And so when we try to build up stronger arms, this exercise really comes in handy. Obviously the shoulders, the pecs, all these different muscles are coming into play here. But as you'll see, this ends up being really heavy on the triceps. There's different ways of doing it. You can do it with your feet flat, the way I have them right now. You can go crisscross applesauce like this to ensure that the back is completely flat, or you can have your feet laid out just like this. Now, with your feet laid out just like this, it's not a bad position because it does take away some leg drive. My problem with it is that your lower back arches in a similar way that it does on a regular bench press. Not that that's bad, but one of the reasons why I love having people use a floor press is when their back is getting overworked from heavy deadlifts and heavy squats. When you're in meet prep, you have no greater friend, you have no greater ally than the floor press. Simply by implementing the floor press, I think you can squat more and deadlift more in your competition because your back is going to be fresher, because we keep arching and we keep holding this position for multiple seconds at a time with every rep and every set that we do on a bench press when our back is like this the whole time, right? Now we're going to go rib cage down, neutral spine, and you may find it best, you might find it most advantageous just to kind of go here. And this way the back is totally and completely flat and you take the leg drive away from it. So just another added bonus to the floor press. Anyone with a back injury, I highly recommend that you do floor presses and do them either feet flat or with your feet up. So what we're going to do, most of the time we have somebody lift off to us or lift out to us. That's always helpful. But what we do here at SuperTraining Gym when it comes to bench, squat, deadlift, we utilize the bar to get ourselves into position. So we are going to arch up slightly, but it's a mid and upper back tightening more so than it is an arch, and it's not an arch with the lower back. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my upper body. I'm going to pull my shoulder blades together, and I'm going to try to tuck them into my back pocket. I'm going to pull my chest up. So here we go, a little bit of a row, just like this. Curl everything underneath, pin those shoulder blades down, and now we're in a good position, okay? If somebody was going to unrack this for me, I could leave my elbows where they are, but because I'm going to unrack it myself, I need to go elbows out just a little bit. I'm also going to bring my hips up a little bit to unrack the weight. I'm going to now unrack the weight, bring the weight out and over me a little bit. And now I'm going to lower. And as I come through here, I'm going to rest the triceps on the floor. My elbows should be tucked into their sides. I can feel that they're not tucked in as much as they should be because I'm out of practice with this and I'm actually not in a great position. So I'm going to kind of start over. I'm going to rack the weight. And the reason why I felt I wasn't in a good position, my chest isn't quite high enough and I didn't emphasize pulling the elbows in. And that's what a floor press will also do for you, is will teach you how to pull your elbows in. It's also going to teach you the sweet spot of the curve of your bench press. So here, as I go to bring the weight out, I got the weight here. Now the elbows come in hard. Pull them in. Pull them into your side. And as you go to rest your elbows on the ground, I want you to actually do a row and then throw the weight up. because you need to learn how tight and how powerful your back is when it comes to bench pressing. We're going to lower the weight down. We're going to pull the elbows in. Then we're going to throw the weight up explosively. You want to rest the triceps on the ground until you feel both triceps equally landing on the ground. You feel some of the weight dissipate into the ground. Then you're going to throw the weight back up. But it's none of this. Okay, I see a lot of that. I also see people doing like a touch and go, and they anticipate like when their elbows are going to hit, and they go too early. You want to come down, elbows touch, pulling the elbows in towards each other, letting the triceps relax a little bit, and then you're going to push back up. So in real time, I'm going to do 5 reps. I'm going to pull each one in and get my upper back nice and tight each time. And on that, I was overemphasizing because on each one, I was actually rowing the weight into me. I'm going to demonstrate it one more time, let my triceps get a little bit of a breather. Some common mistakes I see with the floor press, other than like a touch and go, which is the biggest no-no. I will also see people move their hips. So they'll put their hips up in the air. It leaves you in a similar position to regular bench pressing because now you're using a lot of leg drive. Part of the reason why we're doing a floor press is to emphasize the arms and not the legs. And plus, we don't want to raise our hips off the bench either because that's creating some bad habits. Another issue I see with a floor press is that people are often, as they come out, they're not sure where to bring the weight out to. And then some people will say, you got to take the weight way out, meaning out towards my feet this way. But now it feels like it's going to fall. It feels like it's in a really weird position. Just go to where it feels right, but you do need to make sure that it's low enough, because when we're on this angle on the floor and we don't have an arch, it's going to feel a little bit different to you. Because you got to understand that for most people, unless you're a really wide grip bencher, most people don't bench in a completely straight line. And I'm not saying that benching in a straight line is ineffective, because some people do it really, really well. But normally it's either a girl who's super flexible, who can arch like crazy and get her hands out real wide, or it's one of these big guys that weighs, 400 pounds and they have a big belly, right? One note on that is that sometimes we have some people that are so big and so thick that when you go to do a floor press, the weights touch their chest. What you may want to do is stack a couple mats underneath your elbows if that's the case for you. So here we go. Take the weight out. Find the sweet spot of where to bring the weight out to. Right about here feels good. Now I'm going to bring the weight down. As I'm bringing the weight down, I'm going to pull my chest up and pull the elbows in tight. And there we go. That's how you flow press. Get it on the flow. Where can the floor press be utilized? Floor press can be utilized in a speed bench workout. A floor press can be utilized for some max effort work. A floor press can also be utilized in your assistance work for the day. For me personally, I liked using it on max effort day, and I liked using it on the dynamic effort day a lot. I would say I noticed the most progress when I was utilizing the floor press often with max effort work. And I would sometimes implement chains. Sometimes I'd hook bands up to it. There's a lot of different ways of configuring all that. But the floor press, I think, is one of the better exercises that you can do. So sometimes people are like, oh, well, it works your lockout. Well, it helps your lockout because it helps your bench press. So by way of what the movement is, it's going to help your lockout. But it's also going to help not only your lockout, but your starting position as well, because you're going from a different starting position. Imagine if I was to ask you just to hover the weight off your chest about 1 inch and then reverse it. That would be like a Spoto press, right? That's a little bit of what this is mimicking. It's mimicking a little bit of like a Spoto press done by Eric Spoto, who bench pressed well over 700 pounds and was once the all-time world record holder in the bench press before Kirill Serkev came along, and then Julius Maddox is starting to knock on the door of an 800-pound bench. And Julius Maddox utilizes a lot of great techniques and a lot of great stuff from Josh Bryant. Josh Bryant is a huge proponent and huge fan of mixing things up. I don't know if Julius does a floor press per se. I'm not going to speak for him, but I am aware of a lot of the methods that are utilized by Josh Bryant. And it's this idea of like, hey, keep mixing stuff up until you continue to figure out a way to make progress. Obviously, Julius Maddox uses a lot of regular bench pressing, but you also want to utilize a lot of other forms of bench pressing so you can continue to smash through your plateaus. I personally have seen the floor press help people tremendously. It helped them go from one competition to another where they were able to lift more weight, lock out more weight. But again, I think it's a little bit weird to just associate it with just a lockout, because I think one of the reasons why they were able to overcome that sticking point in their lockout was because of the velocity, the acceleration that they were able to build off of coming from about 1 inch off their chest with a more controlled movement that led to that lockout. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. It's not like they missed lockouts and then all of a sudden we overloaded the top part of the bench press and then they were able to lock those weights out. It's like we utilized a different version of bench pressing, which in this case is the floor press. And because we utilized that different version for a little while, when they went back to bench pressing, they were able to lock the weights out. But that's always the question. How do I fix my lockout? It's like, well, everyone has a hard time kind of locking out bench presses. If you miss weight off of your chest, the easiest fix for that is just that you're just going way too heavy. You need 50 less pounds on the bar. That's usually like not the case. Usually it's not the case that somebody just can't lift it off their chest. We just know, hey, it sounds like you used way too much weight and you're not quite strong enough for that yet. But in the case of when it comes to the lockout, for some reason we have this attachment that all of a sudden we need to do all stuff like this that's shortened range of motion. And I personally, I don't believe that that's necessarily true. As I mentioned earlier, you can utilize the floor press with bands. You can utilize it with chains. Rep and set protocol, you can associate it with some dynamic effort benching, which would be anywhere from 8 sets to 12 sets of 3 reps done as quickly as possible. And those are, you're going to relax them on the ground, press up as hard as you can. Remember what I was teaching you earlier. I would like you to over-exaggerate some of your lighter weights and actually pull the elbow through the floor to learn how tight your back is supposed to be when you're bench pressing. The best benchers in the world, their whole body is as tight as possible during that lift. When you're implementing this for max effort work, very simple. You're going to do 1 to 3 sets with as heavy a weight as you can handle. You could put a slightly different protocol together for it where you do 3 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 5 or 5 by 5. Any number of those things will be really effective. If you're somebody that has a hard time with your lower back is bugging you all the time, stop doing a regular bench press. Get it on the floor. Hit up some floor presses. It will be massively beneficial to you. We went over the execution of it. I told you some of the common mistakes that people use on it. Another common mistake I see in general when people start to utilize a new movement is they go too heavy on it too quickly. The jump that they make during the workout might be too high. So that's something to consider as well. If your best bench is 275, don't come over here and do 135, 225, and then miss 275. Get in a lot more work than that. You know, do the quarters on the side, do a plate and a quarter, do 225. And after you do 225, then make those smaller necessary jumps so you can get in a lot of work. Whenever you're doing anything in regards to strength training, you always have to show your work. How did you get stronger? And if you don't have a good body of work that you did, just like they make you do in school with your math, If you don't have a good body of work that you did, you're probably going to come up with the wrong answer or make a mistake somewhere along the lines. We're trying to build some good consistency, so we need to make sure that we have the correct amount of work under our belt in order to continue to make that progress. You can utilize this exercise very easily as an assistance movement. You can use it with dumbbells. You could just simply do, 10 sets of 10 with it, or 5 sets of 10, or 3 sets of 10 at the end of a given workout. But for me personally, throughout my career of powerlifting, I was utilizing a floor press 52 weeks out of the year. I always did it somewhere. Not in every single bench workout that I did, but I was benching twice a week for a very long time, and almost without fail, there was a floor press in there almost every single week. One area of caution when it comes to a floor press is that you may want to lift on some sort of padding. I have noticed just even by putting down like a hoodie, just my own sweatshirt, putting it on the ground, allowed for my shoulder blades to slide around better on the ground. Sometimes, especially if you're not a thick individual and you're kind of bony, you're going to feel those bones kind of moving around and sliding around and rotating on the ground. It's not a very comfortable feeling, and it can also kind of grind into your shoulder blades. So you saw today I lifted off this Go mat right here. You don't need to get that fancy and get that thick of a mat, but even just something simple like a yoga mat, or like I said, I just used to throw down my sweatshirt. I'm going to show you how to do some floor presses with some dumbbells. Very simple. Get down on the ground. Probably the hardest thing is to figure out like kind of where to put the dumbbells. And sometimes when they're heavy, you might have to have somebody kind of assist in handing them to you, because sometimes it's kind of awkward or strange to curl them up into position. So we go here. Now I'm like right here. And maybe just kind of flip these guys this way. And now I can just kind of curl them and lean them on back. Might have to do kind of one at a time, depending on the strength of your biceps or whatever it might be. And again, you could have someone just hand them to you, whatever way you can get in here. Now, when I do dumbbell work in general, I personally usually like to go with my palms facing each other. In this case, especially for power lifters, I really like this a lot because this can teach us to keep the elbows in tight. I often talk about trying to drop your elbow onto your lat. And for those of you that aren't real big, it's very hard for you to get that picture in your head, especially when you're using a straight bar, because you're normally like this. And you see what happened to my elbows there, how my elbows immediately scooched outward, right? But if I have my hands this way, my elbows don't automatically tuck in, but it makes it easier to kind of keep them in here. Now they can stay this way too, but you ended up with some mobility issues that make it difficult to pull the elbows in that hard. So when the palms are facing each other, it makes it much easier. So here we go. So now I'm going to take my elbows and try to drop them on like my guts, like really scrape them in there. Now I'm kind of exaggerating. My shoulders were going forward a little bit, so I'll see if I can keep the chest up a little bit more. One of the hard things sometimes too with a floor press and dumbbells especially is to kind of get your shoulders in the right place. So you may have to kind of start down here, and then you may have to kind of move your. So what I did there is I just took my back off the ground and I used my foot as like a kickstand. As funny as this little move looks, it helps me to get my rib cage up. If I'm benching like this, my rib cage is too flat and down too much, and it makes me push with my shoulders, and it doesn't feel very good, and it's just kind of incorrect benching. So I'm going to push my elbows into the ground hard. I'm going to pick my body up. I'm going to kick my foot forward, and I'm going to sit right into the right spot with my chest up. So here I go. Right there like that. Now I'm stuck to the floor pretty good. Another thing you can do is simply pick up your hips, and you can kind of wiggle into it that way. And now I feel comfortable and ready to go. So drop the elbows in close to the body. Here, remember, flex into the floor and push up. What are we flexing when we flex into the floor? The triceps? No. We're not flexing the triceps when we go on the floor. We're flexing the back. You might even want to flex the back and the biceps. Here, pull, throw. Pull, throw. Pull, throw. When you pull, you'll feel like you're so much more powerful, so much more explosive, because everything is set nice and tight. Whereas when you come down like this and you try to explode from here, you can still do it. You can still give it a good go, but you're not really doing the exercise the right way. Remember, we want to rest the triceps on the floor, or if you don't have jack triceps, your elbows might actually be hitting the ground. But even more reason to rest on the ground is to make sure that you're not whacking your elbows up against the ground. Get those triceps to stack up on the floor, rest them, and then throw the weight up. You can see I'm moving my head around. That's not necessary. It's just because I have some tightness and I developed kind of a technique in bench pressing where I do move my head around when I bench, so I normally go like this. I don't suggest that you do that. It's something I developed over a long period of time. You could try it, but I just would suggest you keep your head back, pull those weights into you aggressively, and throw them up. How do we have our feet during a floor press? I think it's best to have them either flat or like this. That keeps your back supported and your back nice and flat. When your feet are out here like this, your lower back tends to want to arch a little bit. Here, elbows in tight, explode. Elbows in tight, explode. Elbows in tight, explode. Make sure you're resting on the ground. Make sure you're not going like this, okay? Another great thing about being on the floor is you can start to superset out some exercises. And because you're already down here, you can do like tricep extensions or something like that. It'll make your floor presses really hard, but you can start to kind of understand that doing anything on the floor can be of benefit, because now we just have different ranges of motion. I'm getting stuck here, and now I have to do an extension from there, right? That's a pretty difficult movement. Just whatever you can think of down there, but that's how you floor press with some dumbbells. I think my best floor press ever, I think, is 585. I know I've done 500 pounds for reps. I used to utilize quite a bit of weight even when I was doing a banded floor press. And let me actually see if I can find a band, because this makes the story more impressive. This is like old guy, I get to make up whatever I want, right? I get to tell you like whatever I want right here, and hopefully nobody can dispute it. Oh, well, this mini band didn't quite make it. That's okay. You get the idea. Anyway, a mini band is normally not snapped this way. It's normally a circle like this. And normally we will put a mini band either through some band pegs like this. Okay. We might either put them through there, and we'll put them up around the bar. And then the mini band will add maybe 70 to 90 pounds to the bar at the top when both mini bands are on both sides. And what we used to do for floor presses, because if you were to have it hooked up like this for a floor press, you don't have the weight up here for a floor press because there's no bench press. You're benching off the floor. We would have it like this. We would have it, we would call it being quadded up. So it'd be quadded up like this, okay? Not just doubled, not just like that, because even that would still not work, because you see how low the bar is over here, right? Like even this wouldn't work, because there would be very little tension at the top, and at the bottom there'd be nothing. So we did what we called quadding it up, which is now taking this like that. See how crazy that is? That is like absolutely Looney Tune. But I think I missed it. I think I tried it 4 different times, 4 different occasions. 4 different workouts were devoted to this. I tried it with 500 pounds, and I was never able to get it. But I think I did at least 455 that way, which is pretty damn good, because I think, if I remember correctly, I want to say it's like 200 pounds of band tension at the very top. So when you unrack that thing, you think that you're going to die. It's pretty brutal. I know that, having Stan Efferding and guys like Eric Spoto, come into the gym and have them, doing an exercise like a floor press, it was new, it was different for them. Even a board press, especially when it came to Stan. I mean, both of them made a lot of progress, but Eric Spoto was so strong to begin with that it's just like, It just didn't matter. We just had to teach him how to get through a powerlifting meet was really the main thing. And he was going to have an all-time world record, which is crazy because he didn't even care about a world record and didn't even know he was in line for a world record until we told him that he was. He just didn't give a crap about it that much. But with Stan, I remember the floor press having a huge immediate impact. And I recall in a training session, Stan missing a 600-pound bench in training. And it was one of the few times that Stan missed any lifts in training. We went over and over. We went over it with him a million times about tucking the elbows in. And he just, for whatever reason, he wasn't picking up what we were putting down until we had him emphasize the floor press over and over again. Because the floor press, it's just a little easier to kind of feel that sensation when you're not going through a full range of motion bench press. Plus, the other thing that it did is it allowed us to take a little bit of weight off the bar. When you take weight off the bar, you're able to think about it a little bit more. And so he was able to think and have a reasonable weight that still challenged the muscles enough so he could do something with a given weight and kind of have it more ingrained into his head. And then when we did the meet, I believe he missed 600-pound bench in the contest again, or maybe he missed like 606. He came back and he got it because he remembered that feeling of some of those floor presses where you keep those elbows tucked into your sides. And he blew it up too. It was weird because I was like, oh, great, the whole meet's screwed up. We needed this 600-pound bench, and he missed it, and he went out and he got it. He got it the second time around. If it hadn't been for those floor presses, I'm not sure that he would have had that ingrained into his head to be able to do that. And he just got up off the bench with a huge smile on his face, and he was like, oh yeah, I gotta keep those elbows tucked in. So I think that's too much information for you on the floor press. Hopefully it was a good overload for you. Now, where do you want to incorporate these into your workout? Just put them wherever you want. You can Matt Wenning them. You can put them in the front of your workout, and you could do 3 sets of 15 or 3 sets of 20 before a workout to bring up your general physical preparedness, or you can do it in between doing biceps back and forth after you finished a good bench workout. You are now armed with an exercise that maybe you've heard about before, but maybe you haven't utilized it in a long time. And I'm going to encourage you right now, utilize the floor press. Incorporate it for 2 months. And if you incorporate it for 2 months and you go backwards, you can come back and you can tell me that I'm full of crap. But I think you're going to like the results that you get from it. You'll have more jacked triceps, you'll have stronger triceps, and you'll end up with a bigger bench. And who doesn't want that? Lastly, I'll just finish with, don't forget that you could still utilize a slingshot if you're somebody that has some shoulder pain and you have some issues, even when you're doing a floor press. Now, a cool thing about a floor press, though, usually, for most people, is a lot of times it takes that pain away even without using a slingshot because it's a partial range of motion. Because usually that last inch or two is where people have the most discomfort in the shoulder. That's TMI. That's the floor press. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you all later.